So I'm gonna briefly go over who I am, what I do, what the importance of it is, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit about process, and then more importantly, I'm gonna save some time for the fine folks up here to talk about how they're helping us to advance our mission and help the folks here in Chester City. So, as Secretary, I was appointed April 1st of 2019 by our 34th Lieutenant Governor, John Fetterman. Those of you who don't know who John Fetterman is, he's the big biker-looking guy who wears the coat, the Carhartts and the Dickies. But he's a forward-thinking person, right? And how, Ibrahim said about his chance meeting with Senator Kane, we had an odd way of meeting, and it wasn't even supposed to be a job, but it was his foresight, it was him being progressive that really set the table for me to be able to oversee this agency. So the one thing I should say to folks too, one of the things that was said prior to me coming up was about there's a ton of folks that are reentrants in this room, or that have been justice involved, however you want to, or ex-offenders, however you want to classify yourself. But there's a lot of folks that they're unsuspecting reentrants, so to speak, right? So the same deal for me. I previously served 9 years in the Department of Corrections, 5 years, right, at Chester. And that's where Mayor Linder was saying, that's where I actually met Mayor Linder during I believe it was a cultural awareness class that I ended up getting plugged in with, and it was that kind of programming. I always give a shout out to Chester. It was that kind of programming. I think one of the benefits of Chester being smack dab in the city is you have a ton of resources, a ton of volunteers that you otherwise would not see that would have any involvement in prisons that are situated in more rural locations, right? So if you're up in Albion, I served my 4 years up Albion. Wasn't nobody coming in. You might get a faith-based person to come in, but by and large, there wasn't much stimulation there. Whereas with SCI Chester, tons of stimulation, and it was folks, it was volunteers like Mayor Linder that really opened my mind up and really got me to thinking about what I wanted to do after I left. So I wanted to kind of set this. That's the one cool thing about being in this position. So I also was a recipient of a pardon myself too. March 17th of 2019. Governor Wolf issued me my own pardon and allowed me to restart my life, so to speak. And as I was saying, to be completely transparent with everyone, I just wanted my pardon. I wasn't concerned about overseeing this. Obviously I wanted to be able to pay it forward, but I had my sights set on, public office, and that was the main reason why I had requested, or I submitted an application for a pardon. So, but I also understood this moment here, right? Because we can have all the community-based folks and organizations and individuals, community activists in the world, but at the end of the day, we need more decision makers, right? We need more reentrants in decision-making positions. I had a pretty funny life, right? Even my two predecessors in this position, I knew them both very well, especially, and that relationship was forged by me putting in my application, being very proactive. And before I took this position, I consulted with my predecessor, her name was Mavis Nemo. She was the first black woman to serve as secretary. She's no longer obviously in that position. She's moved to Connecticut. She's working in the education field. But I asked her, I said, hey, should I take this job? What all does it entail? And she told me no. She told me I shouldn't take the job. She told me exactly what it entails. You're resource starved. That's a huge uphill battle, never ending, huge backlog. So she gave me all of the disincentives to take this position. But as was mentioned earlier, I knew once I left SCI Chester that I wasn't leaving. I think Representative Kirkland said it about the guys behind the wall, right? I didn't want to leave the guys behind the wall. I wanted to, even if for the ones that weren't coming home, I wanted to still be able to move the needle forward for them. So I took it as if I had to take this position, right? No matter how much I was discouraged from doing so, because it was important, and more importantly, I've had an opportunity to really be able to drive reform, right? So I'm gonna skip over from that part, and I'm gonna talk about process and what my job entails and what a day-to-day looks like and what the pardon process looks like. So as secretary, I'm considered the chief administrator for what's known as Executive Clemency in Pennsylvania. I'm sure some other folks will talk about that a little bit later, but Executive Clemency, for those of you who don't know what that means, at least the technical term, Executive clemency is mercy or forgiveness extended from the executive branch, which is the governor, to anyone that's been convicted of a crime in Pennsylvania. So think of executive clemency as the umbrella term for mercy, forgiveness, and it's made up of two parts. Pardons, which is what we're going to be talking about primarily here today. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is commutations. So how many of you here know anyone or have family members that are serving life without parole? Anyone? So for commutation, in Pennsylvania, as you guys know, life is life. If someone's sentenced to life, you are required to serve your natural life in prison. Your only recourse of being released from prison currently, if you are convicted or if you are sentenced to life, is commutations. So pardons, commutations, that's what makes up executive clemency in Pennsylvania. So my job is, as secretary, again, I serve as the chief administrator, so my job is to drive our policy making, but more importantly, my job is to deal with the intake of applications, processing of applications, the preparation of applications for our board members, the scheduling of hearings, and then, as I said, the policy making side. The lieutenant governor brought me on precisely for the reason because he wanted to reform the executive clemency process. A lot of people didn't know that there was an executive clemency process prior to 2019. By show of hands, how many people here prior to January of 2019 knew anything about pardons or knew about the Board of Pardons or the executive clemency process? How many of you knew? So that's part of the reason why we're here too, because it is about education and outreach. Just because I got my pardon, I didn't want to just take that and run with it. I want to be able to pay it forward because, it's been my experience since I've been in this role for about 2.5 years now, that the vast majority of people who are interested in applying for pardons were better applicants than I was. They're more further removed from their last conviction than I was. I just came home February of 2010. You have a lot of people whose last convictions were in the 1990s and 1980s, especially for nonviolent offenses. I also want to give a shout out here to Carmina. Yeah, you said something. So I
was coughing.
So Carmina Taylor, and this is what this is about too. It's about us collaborating. It's about working smarter, not harder. So Carmina Taylor, she's heading up an organization called We Can't Wait. We currently have a statewide initiative where the statewide initiative is called Put Your Pardon in the Pipeline, right? So we're going to barbershops in different parts of Pennsylvania, particularly some of the more resource-starved areas or where there isn't much representation, like your Williamsport, your Johnstown, where you have these quasi-rural areas, but they have significant minority populations, black and brown folks. So we're going to these different barbershops. We're meeting people where they are. We want to be able to, a lot of people probably didn't show up here today because they don't want people to know that they have a criminal record, right? I know for me, and the mayor, he joked about it, about the last kind of suit that I had on. But that was my mindset when I was leaving prison. I had a GQ magazine subscription that whole 5 years. I had it mapped out what I was going. It's about reinventing yourself. And for a lot of people that went through the system, they reinvented themselves, whether voluntarily or there was some experience that caused them to that prompted them to do that. So. No, when I came home, I didn't leave with, hey, I just came out of prison. For those of you that knew me or that worked with me in state government, you'll know that those 10 years before I got appointed to this position, I didn't share any information about that. I know I worked closely with a lot of folks, and it wasn't because I was ashamed about it, but as what was said earlier, right? I didn't want to be judged unfairly. I didn't want opportunities to be choked off to me. Just because it don't matter who you are. I say if you're urbanite, you're a suburbanite, someone tells you that they did time in prison, you process that information and you have a different perception of them, right? So I didn't want to be judged that way, so I was very intentional when I came home that the last thing that you would associate with me was that I was incarcerated. And part of the reason why I did that too is because we talked about spaces where reentrants aren't occupying. One place I didn't see a lot of reentrants was in government, local, state, and federal. Me being from Harrisburg and being a longtime native of Harrisburg, there's no better place in Pennsylvania for me to be going back to from prison if I wanted to get into politics. And I had the good fortune of another state representative from Philadelphia. He's a former state representative, Frank Oliver Sr. He gave me my first start as an internship with the House of Representatives. I only met him one time, right? He gave me the internship kind of just on the strength. He heard my story, and as was said, he gave me that second chance and allowed me to really see what government was like. And that once I got in, I became a sponge, and my main objective was really to be able to navigate state government, get as far into government as possible before I shared my story, right? Because I wanted to be able to have the resume, even working with Eric. I worked with Eric for, 4 or 5 years. Eric didn't know either, because I wanted to be judged based upon the content of my character, my work product. And then when it came out that, hey, this guy has 2 felonies, that my reputation would be unassailable at that point, right? Because you already know what I bring, you already know that I'm competent, you already know that I'm capable. So let's talk about process a little bit. So let's talk about how the pardon process used to work and how it works today. And before I do that, again, I'm doing a lot of verbal surveys here. How many people here have previously applied for clemency before? Whether you were denied or you received a pardon. Anyone here previously applied? Successfully? How many successfully applied? All right, so we got congratulations. And one thing that folks will tell you that have previously applied is that, and even myself as a former applicant, this was a very complex and convoluted process, right? Even for someone like myself who had been working in the legislature for 6 years and was somewhat familiar with legal jargon and technical language, it was a very difficult process to navigate, and the vast majority of people that proceeded on their own oftentimes didn't finish. So one of the half-truths you oftentimes heard about the pardon process was that it was very cost prohibitive, right? It cost a lot to navigate that process. And I call it a half-truth because it used to be only $63 if you applied on your own. But it was so complex, almost everyone felt like they had to outsource it to an attorney. And no shade to the attorneys in the room, but once you outsourced it to an attorney, they marked it up to $5,000, $7,500, and in many cases $10,000, right? And a lot of us don't have that kind of money just sitting around. And more importantly, a lot of us don't have that kind of money to shell out for something that didn't provide immediate relief. Pardon process back even 4 years ago was about a 4 to 5 year process, and it didn't guarantee what the outcomes were too. So you're shelling out $10,000 for something that's not guaranteed and that may not yield the desired outcome. So the one change that we made is pardons now are free in Pennsylvania. But it wasn't enough just to make it free, right? Because part of the issue, part of the reason why people outsourced to an attorney, because it was complex, right? So we looked at our own application, we overhauled that application, we pared it down from what used to be a 14-page document to a 9-page document. We reworded a lot of the questions. We wanted to make it so that the average layperson, someone who didn't have a legal background, would understand how to navigate that process. We actually have video tutorials now. If you go on our website, www.bop.pa.gov, you'll see there's tons of resources. There's a video tutorial with myself on there, literally going through each section of the application. The goal here was to make it foolproof, right? We wanted to make it so that people were comfortable navigating this process and that they didn't need a paid attorney to navigate this process. So it's literally free. The only exception to that is there are certain court documents that you have to get. So depending upon the county you're in, here in Delaware County, they may charge you a photocopying fee, but it's free. So there's really no need to consult an attorney unless you have pro bono attorneys here that are helping you guys without charging you. But it is really a simplified process. The other part of this too is about access, right? How many of you prior to at least the first time that I came up here knew that there was knew that there was a secretary of the Board of Pardons or had any familiarity of who that person was? So a couple, right? So, and by and large, most of the folks that were in that role kind of chained themselves to the desk, right? It was really about advancing the status quo. Board of Pardons has been around for almost 150 years, and largely what and no shade to my predecessors. No shade at all, but most of my predecessors really did not try to advance the need or do anything outside of the box, right? It's kind of like, hey, this is our process, and we have to, and this is the process that we have to adhere to. So I'm gonna talk about a few things that a few more reforms that we've made, then I'll talk about process, and then I'll turn it back over. So yes?
Could you repeat that, because I think that's very significant. Repeat the part that you said that none of your predecessors. Repeat that.
Right. So she wanted me to repeat that none of my predecessors really got themselves outside of their office, right? And really got to meet people and really thought about, hey, how can we reform this process? It was more so the mindset was, how do we preserve this process? And for me, that anyone that knows me, I know that's not my MO whatsoever. My thing is, I want to be, the Lieutenant Governor wanted us to make this a more efficient process, a more accessible process, and we wanted to modernize it, right? I said we've been around since 1872, and prior to January 2019, many of our processes were very much kind of 19th century-esque. And there's still a lot of outdated processes that we still have to, that we're still dealing with. A lot of things that I can change myself administratively, but then there's a lot of things that have to be changed legislatively or through regulation. So, I'm a gray area guy, so we look for ways to make this a more agile and efficient process. So, I talked about it being a free process. The other thing that we're doing, and it hasn't been implemented yet, is we're going to be transitioning to an online platform. So right now, currently, and the way it's always been, it's been a paper-based process. You had to fill out a paper app, download a paper application, fill out the paper application, submit the paper application. Next year, early 2022, we'll be beginning the first phase of the online filing process. That way, you can literally fill out your pardon application using your smartphone or your handheld device. The reason why that's important is because, again, we talk about access. We talk about folks being comfortable navigating this process, right? Most of us spend a ton of time on our phones, right? So what better use of your phone if you're already going to be having that screen time than navigating this process? The other thing that we did is that we created, and what we've never done historically, is we've created what's known as expedited review. So it used to be historically that every application went through the same process. Didn't matter what the offense was, didn't matter how long ago it was. And for me, that's an imprudent use of resources. And again, it's not making this process efficient, right? Why should we demand the same level of scrutiny and review for someone that has a misdemeanor from the 90s, as I heard over here, that we would for someone convicted of first-degree murder? So the first thing that we did, and part of my job is convincing, there's a 5-member board that ultimately votes on these applications. So it's not Brandon that votes on them. I just prepare them for the board to review. So it's a 5-member board that votes on them. Our Lieutenant Governor, he serves as our chair. The Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, he serves as a board member. And then we have 3 other governor-appointed board members that serve for 6-year staggered terms. So we have a victim representative, we have a corrections expert, and we have a psychologist. So part of my job is convincing those 5 board members, hey, let's change the way that we do this. Or how about we tweak the information that you guys get in review? Sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's not, right? As we heard, as the saying goes, old habits die hard. A lot of people, we talk about public safety. Part of my job is impressing upon the board members that, hey, these folks convicted of marijuana-related offenses or nonviolent, non-sexual offenses, these kind of cases, especially after a certain period of time, should receive minimal review. And we have the stats to back it up that the folks that fall into that category are the ones that are least likely to reoffend, and more importantly, they're less likely to reoffend violently. So getting the board to kind of think and open that perspective up. So we started with marijuana-related offenses. If you know the Lieutenant Governor, you know that's one of the centerpieces, that's been the centerpiece of his campaign for Lieutenant Governor, and is currently the centerpiece of his campaign for U.S. Senate. So regardless of where you stand on the issue of whether or not marijuana should be legal for recreation use, for adult recreation use, the fact of the matter in Pennsylvania is legalization is going to happen. That's guaranteed. It's going to happen. It's a matter of it. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when. So we wanted to be proactive and say, hey, listen. The one thing that's not guaranteed is when that bill is finally passed into law, will it have any retroactive relief for people that were convicted prior to it being legal? That's the part. And Pennsylvania has a track record for not having any provisions that provide for retroactivity. Most of those bills are considered prospective, right? Meaning from that time it's enacted into law moving forward, that's who it applies to. So we wanted to be proactive. We created an expedited review program for marijuana-related offenses. Mostly this program was set up for those that are convicted of small possessions. Small possession, that's 30 grams or less, but we also consider a lot of felony cases. We do have some people that have, and that's where the lieutenant governor can say, hey, listen, we wanted to hear cases we wanted to review cases on a case-by-case basis, right? That there may be someone convicted of a felony marijuana-related offense that was 10 years ago, or that person may have been growing for personal use. So we didn't want to exclude certain populations. So I believe October of 2019, we created the expedited review process. And what expedited means is, so you heard me say earlier, it used to take about 4 to 5 years for the pardon process to work itself out. Currently, it's about a 3-year process, but for our expedited cases, it's about an 18-month process. And part of the reason why it takes so long is we have a good problem on our hands these days. So we have more people applying more now than ever. Just to give you some context of how many people were applying compared to prior to January 2019. Prior to January 2019, historically, we never received more than 600 applications per year. We ended calendar year 2019, we had over 1,100 applications. And then during 2020, despite there being a global pandemic, we finished the year with more than 2,400 applications.
That's excellent.
So, well, that's excellent. Having that such a market increase in applications being submitted, that naturally will impact turnaround times, right? Turnaround time. If we have six staffers but have 400% more applications, obviously, there's only so much blood you can get out of a turnip. And for me, we currently have a 9-member staff. I think the last time I was here, we ended up adding 3 new people. So part of what my job is too is really beefing up our infrastructure, right? Because think about this. Yeah, that deserves a clap.
No, we need some funding.
Right, this is the point I'm about to make.
We need the state reps some funding.
So this. Think about it, and I'm gonna give you some context here, right? If I'm not mistaken, in 1980, the stat was there were less than 5,000 people incarcerated in the Department of Corrections in 1980. Right now, there's over 40,000 folks, right? So think about this, 1980, we likely had the same staff complement, probably 4 or 5 people. So when we talk about mass incarceration, right? If our staff isn't being increased commensurate with the number of folks that are entering the system, you have a ton of people that are locked into this system, and that there isn't any the release valve for folks to get relief. So we need to be able to beef up our infrastructure so that we can hear more cases and that more people can get relief. The other part of this too, and this is the other difficult part of my job, is no one likes to do more work, right? Especially if your pay is not going to increase. So in addition to getting my staff to buy in to say, hey, listen, we need to do more, we need to ramp things up. That 5-member board, and they're a part-time board that you heard me talk about, that 5-member board is now getting more work. And they have their own respective jobs and responsibilities. So being able to strike that fine balance between getting more applications in, with this, making this in a more efficient process. So that's part of the reason why I'm able to get the board to say, hey, listen, you don't need a ton of information for these marijuana cases. We did since 2019, and this was more of a pilot program. So what we did is we created that, let the board, that allowed me to show the board that, hey, listen, you're receiving less information for certain applicants. The world didn't catch on fire. Public safety wasn't compromised. Now let's expand this expedited review to other offenses. So I was able to get them to agree to expand our expedited review to when it comes to those that are convicted of nonviolent, non-sexual offenses that are at least 15 years removed from their last offense. So anyone that falls into that category, their applications are being processed within that 18-month timetable versus that 3-year timetable. One of the other changes that we made, and COVID really drove this change, was how we interview applicants. It used to be historically, didn't matter how long ago your offense was, didn't matter if you moved to Tibet, you were expected to come all the way to Harrisburg for your hearing, even if it was guaranteed that you were going to get a favorable decision from the board. One example that stands out to me is we had a guy who was convicted of a misdemeanor retail theft 30 years ago, moved to Seattle, Washington. He literally had to come all the way to Harrisburg for 3 minutes. So getting the board, getting the board to consider applicants, the votes too. And I'll talk a little bit more about votes. The vote should matter, right? If someone gets a 5-0 versus a 3-2, that should matter, right? So what I got the board to agree to is I said, hey, listen, and I ran the data. And that's oftentimes, especially when I first came on, a lot of my board members who didn't know me, they weren't necessarily receptive to taking orders from, this new guy who's trying to shake things up. So, you have to be tactful in how you deliver it and you make it, a lot of times make it seem like it's their idea, right? Or that they're driving this. But data is key. So the one thing I've seen is that when it came to nonviolent, non-sexual offenders, and I looked at a 3-year period, nonviolent, non-sexual offenders who received a vote of 5-0, 4-1 during our merit review hearings. And our merit review hearings are kind of like preliminary hearings that determines whether you get a full public hearing. Everyone that fell into that category, nonviolent, non-sexual, 4-1, 5-0, every application was recommended to the governor. So what I said to the board was, hey, listen, everyone that falls into this category, you don't need to interview them. There should be enough information on that application for you to advance that application forward. How that's helpful? Obviously, there's more people. This allows the board to hear more cases and not necessarily kill them, right? With having to interview all of those cases. So where it used to be we could only hear 100 cases per session, now we're easily hearing 200 plus cases per session. So that was one change that we made. The other change that we made is we looked at, and this is where I'm sure the fine folks up here will talk a little bit more about, is culture, right? Even with the board. Our board members are a mixed bag. We have some folks that are Democrats, some folks that are staunch conservatives. So getting them to look at certain offenses and certain type of offenders and getting them to really be able to say, hey, listen, let's fast track these applications through versus, and then that way we can spend more time on commutation cases. You heard me talk earlier about those that are sentenced to life. Those are the cases that usually take the longest. Those are the cases that usually the more detailed review is required. Obviously, because in those cases, the vast majority of folks that are sentenced to life are sentenced to life because they were convicted of a violent offense. So, one of the things that we're looking to do and that we've already done, you heard me talk about the online platform, but we're also creating kind of a screening tool too, right? Because one of the questions, and I'm sure I'll get this a little bit later, is when should I put in? How long should I have to wait? Do I have to wait before I put in? Currently, Pennsylvania law doesn't dictate how long someone has to wait. We don't have any minimum eligibility requirements. So you can apply at any time that you wish. And so while that's great, one of the drawbacks of that is you have a ton of people who shouldn't be applying that are applying, right? And that oftentimes creates that bottleneck and that backlog for the deserving applicants. So creating kind of this system where we can filter out the ones that I consider non-viable versus the ones that are considered viable. So one of the things that we instituted and will really help us with our backlog and it will help us with the turnaround time is when it comes to those incarcerated cases. One thing we saw during the pandemic is that, and for anyone that has any loved ones that were incarcerated, they were on complete lockdown during the pandemic. So what you ended up having is you had a ton of people with nothing but time on their hands, right? So and obviously you had the lieutenant governor and myself going to these different prisons and telling people to put in, and folks really took us up on it, right? And so much so that we received more than half of those applications we received in 2020. 1,200 applications came from incarcerated applicants. And this was a mixed bag of people and a lot of them weren't people that were serving life. These were people that were serving 2 to 4 year sentences. They didn't like the decision they got from parole board. We had people applying that were in the hole. And there were a ton of people that just shouldn't have been applying, but legally they're able to. So what we did is we created this internal screening process that really separates those that are viable versus non-viable. They still get their due process, they still get a public hearing, or they still get a merit review hearing, but we have a different process where we can spend, instead of us expending tons of energy and resources on prepping these cases that we know are going to go down in flames, now we spend minimal time on that. We do what we are required to do from a regulatory standpoint, and we're able to get those applications out the way. So that's going to result in the timetable going, the timetable's being much shorter. So I'm gonna talk about process real quick, and then I'm gonna turn it over. So how it works currently in Pennsylvania, if you're gonna apply for a pardon, what you would do is you would go to our website, you would download a copy of the application. There's application instructions. The most difficult part about this process, and it's not difficult, I don't know, do we have the Clerk of Courts or anyone here in the house from Clerk of Courts? The most difficult part of this process is obtaining court records from the Clerk of Courts. And that's not difficult. At least, depends on the county. Delaware County has been pretty good. Montgomery County, I don't know if there's anyone here from Montgomery County, not so much. They're they can be pretty difficult, but it's pretty easy now, where you literally call the Clerk of Courts, you tell them what documents you need for your application, they assemble it for you, and then all you have to do is go to the Clerk of Courts and copy and roll. It's that simple. That's the most difficult part. You fill out the application, you submit those court documents with that application, and you send it to us. Usually it takes about 3 to 4 weeks from the time you send that application for us to acknowledge that we have receipt of it. At that time, we'll either tell you that your application was submitted completely, or if there's anything missing. If your application is not missing anything, that letter will say the next phase for you is for your application to be officially filed. Right now, it's taking about 15, 16 months for regular cases for applications to be filed. For our expedited cases, it's taking between 6 and 12 months for them to be filed. Once your application is filed, it goes to the district attorney, president judge, probation and parole. Probation and parole conducts our background investigations. They'll likely come out and do conduct what's known as a present status interview. For our expedited cases, this is another efficiency that we adopted. So when it comes to our expedited cases, instead of having probation and parole come to your residence, do this long drawn out interview, we just issue questionnaires now. So I asked my board, hey, listen, why can't we have these people fill out questionnaires? They can fill it out well in advance, and then you have the same amount of information that you would have gotten if you had someone to interview. You save probation and parole a little bit of gas money and time, right? So that's something that we adopted. So at that point, once your application is filed, you'll have that interview or your questionnaire be submitted, and then probation and parole will compile a report. That report that they give to us, that's the report that we use to prepare an analysis, and that's largely what the board looks at. So we take that comprehensive report, we distill all of the main factors or the pertinent factors that the board wants to review, we put in an analysis form, and that's what the board largely judges folks by when they make a decision. So once that analysis is done, you'll be scheduled for a merit review hearing. As you heard me say, merit review hearings are kind of like preliminary hearings. Much like the name suggests, merit review hearings really determine whether your application merits you getting a full public hearing. The way the process works, or at least voting wise, if you aren't convicted or if you're not serving life without parole, or you aren't currently incarcerated, you only need 2 out of 5 votes to get a public hearing. If you fall into any of those other categories, you need 3 out of 5 votes to get the public hearing. Usually we schedule after the merit review, we schedule a public hearing usually about 30, 45 days after that. And that's the hearing that's really for all the marbles. And this is where it's important, right? So if you are required to appear in person, our board members will interview you. They will ask very pointed questions, depending upon the nature of your offenses or how extensive your criminal history is, really will dictate how many questions are posed and what kind of questions are posed. We have some board members, admittedly, that may ask questions that may be provocative, right? So it's important that you keep your composure and be able to answer in a clear and concise way. You heard me talk about earlier, the pandemic really forced us to pivot because we used to have those hearings in person. Now all of our hearings are held virtually. They're held via Zoom. You can literally go to our website. We have our calendar already mapped out for the entire year. You can literally live stream and watch the proceedings. So for anyone who's thinking about putting in for a pardon, I would encourage you to watch those proceedings. You'll get a better flavor for what kind of questions the board members are asking, what the expectation is. That way you won't be so nervous. Myself in particular, you heard me talk about working for the House of Representatives. It used to be, before they were virtual hearings, they were always held in the Supreme Court room in Harrisburg. Now, I worked in that building for 8 years, and never, even with my application pending, I never made a trip upstairs to look to see how things work. So when I finally got called, it was my time. Now, admittedly, my armpits were sweating. I was nervous, right? Obviously, I did a well enough job to get the pardon, but it would have benefited me more by being able to do that homework and be prepared. So that's one of the benefits of us having these virtual hearings that really will prepare you for success. That said, once you get that public hearing, if you're requesting to be interviewed, you will patch in via Zoom. As I said earlier, depending upon your vote tallies and what your convictions are, you may not have to appear at all. Those hearings will be held without you. When it comes to the public hearing, here's how voting works. So voting changes a little bit versus the merit review hearing versus the public hearing. So public hearing, if you're serving a sentence of life without parole or death, you have to receive 5 out of 5 votes, so a unanimous vote. If you don't fall into either of those categories, you only have to obtain what's known as a majority vote. So 3 out of 5 votes. We usually hold those, we call the vote the last day of our hearings. Usually our hearings are about 3 days. So that Friday morning is usually when we call the vote. You'll be able to see and watch right there in real time the vote being called. Once the vote's called, what we do and how Pennsylvania works, we have what's known as a gatekeeper system. So Pennsylvania, we have that 5-member board that you heard me talk about. That 5-member board, the governor can only act on applications that 5-member board recommends to. There's other states where the governor has unilateral power, where they can issue pardons to whomever they wish. If you're familiar with the federal system, it's kind of the same deal with the president. The president can issue pardons. Most notably, you've seen Lil Wayne and some other folks, and that's most people's frame of reference when it comes to pardons is the federal side, right? Whoever's the president at the time, usually we're hearing about controversial pardons that are being issued at the end of that administration. So a whole different process for federal pardons, and we can talk about that too. That's on our website too. So what happens once you get the vote? Your application gets recommended to the governor. The governor is not required to act on your application within any specified time period. The governor can wait 2 weeks. The governor can take 2 years. The governor can leave office and not act on your application. We've tried to be better. And again, part of me being brought on was to make this process more efficient. So for us, usually we get a lot of emails from people asking about the status. Where's my application? Did the governor act on it? What's next? Or what's taking long? So for us, we've worked with the governor's office to create a more standardized turnaround time. So instead of people kind of just waiting, indefinitely, now it's taking about 3 to 6 months from the time that your application is recommended to the governor for him to act on it. So that's another efficiency that we included. So once your application is recommended to the governor acts on your application, we send you what's known as a Charter of Clemency. And that Charter of Clemency is what allows you to get your record expunged. So once you get that Charter of Clemency, you can take that charter to the clerk of courts, and file a petition for expungement and get your record expunged, but you don't have to do that. Now, this will be my last point before I turn it over. You don't have to do that, and I'm prime example number 1. So I didn't go through with the expungement process, and part of the reason why I didn't is because it can be a very costly process. So the way it works in Pennsylvania, and this is a deficiency in state law, or it was intentional in drafting it this way, where it's a 2-part process. You get the pardon allows you to apply for expungement. It doesn't happen automatically, but when you get the pardon is pretty much what is the reset button, and as long as you produce that pardon, that allows you to overcome the disability of having a conviction. Now, it may inconvenience you. So how it works is, when you get a pardon, you have to submit a petition for expungement for each docket that you were pardoned for. So in my case, I have five dockets that I was pardoned for, and it varies in the county how much that filing fee costs. So I'm from Dauphin County. Dauphin County costs about $312 per petition. So I would have to pay out about $1,500 and change for that expungement. I got you, my man. And I'm not paying that $1,500, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't provide me, it doesn't give me any less or more relief. And at the end of the day, I'll deal with the being inconvenienced. And more importantly, I'm a little bit unique because part of my job is telling my story, right? So I'm kind of upfront with my record versus someone who may want to leave the past as the past. Then it would probably behoove you to go through with that, right? If you want to go into a field that you previously couldn't go into and you don't want to be inconvenienced, then it may be in your benefit to do that. But I say that to say is even despite me not going through with the expungement process, I still was able to obtain my concealed carry permit. I'm also actively seeking to enlist in the part-time with the National Guard. Even that came up too. But again, the pardon allowed me to be able to overcome that. I'll give you one funny story. Is after probably about maybe 7 months after I got my pardon, I moved to a new apartment complex. Well, I was attempting to move to a new apartment complex. They ran the background check. The apartment complex said, "Hey, something came back. We can't. It's a no-go." So what happened is, and this is how PA law works, is how many people are familiar with? It's called the Pennsylvania Unified Judicial Portal. You can go to that free portal. It takes about 10 seconds. You can look up anyone's docket. So a lot of people use that portal for background check purposes, despite there being a disclaimer on the website saying this is not meant to be used for background check purposes. They actually very explicitly refer you to obtain a background check through the state police. But a lot of people use that portal because number one, it's free, it's easy, especially if you're a small mom and pop. That keeps overhead low, right? I don't have to pay for an actual the PSP. I don't have to pay for a background check. And if anything populates any kind of dockets, usually whoever that decision maker is, they throw your application to the left. So that's what happened. And when you get a pardon, that's the only way that someone can see that you still have a record, is if you don't go through with that expungement, your record is still on that portal. So it was very easy for me once they said, "Hey, we found something." I countered back and said, "Hey, listen, clearly you went to the portal. I'm gonna screenshot you the disclaimer, and I'm also gonna send you a copy of the pardon." So long story short, probably took about 2 hours. I now live in that complex. So it inconvenienced me a little bit, but I'm here to let you know is if you don't go through with that expungement process, and for some people, cost is a thing. I encounter a lot of applications where you have people that have 10 plus dockets, right, that they've been pardoned for. Now, if you're in Dauphin County, you're paying $3,000, right, at least. And that's certainly unfair. One change, and then I'll turn it over. One change that has been recently made that somewhat addresses this issue, but it won't go into effect until December of this year, is there was a bill passed last year, House Bill 440, that provided, it's somewhat of a misnomer, automatic expungement for people that received a full acquittal or that received a pardon. So that was the bill, but once it got to the finish line, the automatic expungement still applied to the full acquittals, but when it came to pardons, what it does is it provides automatic sealing. So that sealing, it is deficient, but what the sealing does is it removes your information from that portal. So essentially it is still tantamount to expungement because folks won't be able to find those records on in that portal. However, we have a year from December 29th of 2020 to put that in motion. So we have the December 29th of 2021 to implement that. But that moving forward from that point, when someone gets the pardon, that stuff will be automatically removed from the portal. I keep saying one last thing, but as I'm talking, things keep coming up. So let's talk about what a pardon actually restores, right? So it is, if you go to our website, we say it is the restart button. It is as if you've never been convicted of a crime. You can legally say, "I've never been convicted of a crime." All your civil rights are restored. You heard me say earlier, I applied because I wanted, my interest in pursuing public office, but it allows you to do that legally if you have certain convictions. It allows you to enlist in the military. You heard me talk about the National Guard. It allows you to travel internationally. It allows you to be able to, and this is one thing we've seen during the pandemic, tons of people found out during the pandemic that they weren't eligible to obtain their concealed carry permit. Much like myself, when we were in the throes of the pandemic, I was stockpiling myself too, right? So a lot of people, because there was uncertain times, wanted to be able to get a firearm to protect themselves and found out, hey, I can't because I had this conviction. So getting a pardon allows you to have your firearm rights restored. And I said, and also, and this is the other, this would be my second one. Public office was the main reason, but the close second was my ability to be able to serve as a juror, right? I've been on the other side as a defendant, so most people are looking to get out of jury duty these days. I'm actually looking forward to being called to jury duty. So those are the civil rights that are restored. Real quick, my man, I know you had a question, or did I end up answering it for you?
No, I was just wanting to say when I got my pardon, I went through legal aid, and they expunged it for me because I didn't have the money at the time. So I see legal aid right there, so I wanted to give them and let them know that.
Yeah.
You can't
Let's
go
give them a
to
round of applause.
You got that water.
Oh, thank you. Because there are a lot of organizations that help with that too. Especially, I know with Philadelphia, the Defenders Association, if you were convicted and you had a public defender, they also do help with the expungement for free. It varies by county. But I just want to let folks know that in the event if cost is an issue, or you are in a county where it's not as easy to be able to get that relief, that you don't necessarily need it. I usually get calls from people every day or emails from former pardon recipients that may have moved to a new state and say, hey, listen, this came up. Usually my response is the same. They use that portal, send them the information that they need, and they're able to overcome that. So that said, I'm gonna turn it over to our fine folks here. I don't know if there's anything specifically you want to address, and then I'm also happy to entertain any questions as well.
So, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanner Rouse. I'm the first assistant district attorney. It's an honor to be here with you. And I'm going to keep it brief. I'm not going to get as nitty-gritty as the secretary. I won't claim to be an expert on it, but I'm going to be a little more blunt. There are too many people in this city and in this county that have committed small offenses. They've made their mistakes. They've served their time. They've walked off their probation, and they still have something hanging over their head, impacting their lives, keeping them from going and changing their lives and their families' lives. I'll be more blunt than the secretary was able to be. It's wrong, okay? The district attorney's office, we recognize that. Right now, this administration, we are big believers that an important part of helping keep your community safe is helping allow people to live a more prosperous life and to work with them to do that. This program, these events, this education, the shift you heard Secretary Flood talk about in the Board of Pardons, these initiatives have our support. We will be here for Chester. We will be here for the people that are trying to make their lives better, and we stand beside everyone that is doing so. That said, I apologize talking about consequences and unintended consequences. If I don't get home and get my kids to bed, I'm going to face some consequences. So I'm about to leave. But Jonathan, a number of people, Representative Kirkland, Senator Kane, they know how to get in touch with us. So if you have questions, if you need help, see Corey Long, my friend, for making a change over here. If there are questions, if there are issues, we are easy to get in touch with, we are responsive, and we want to help. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate everything, and thank you, Secretary Flood, for helping spread the word about all the good work that's going on.
Real quick. And yeah, I can stand up here for 4 hours and talk about this, but the first assistant district attorney mentioned something that's crucial. One of the things that I tell people who navigate this process, and this is where it's important, where you have your actual district attorney in these rooms. You get to know who they are, and you get to get that FaceTime with them. Is when we file those applications and send them to the district attorney, oftentimes that district attorney only gets to know who you are on paper. So take an opportunity before you apply, simultaneously with you applying, to reach out to the district attorney and say, hey, listen, I'm applying. You know, obviously you would want to be able to solicit their support, but even if you don't get their support, I think the one thing that's valuable from having that face-to-face conversation is, number one, they get to see who you are, get to see, be able to discern whether or not you're genuine and you're changed. But even if they're no, you get to find out firsthand, hey, well, what exactly can I do? What's the pathway to get to yes? So I encourage anyone who may be thinking about applying, anyone who's already applied, is reach out to the district attorney. Let them know that you've applied, let them know that you're soliciting their support, and have that FaceTime. It goes a long way, and it certainly can't hurt you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm here to say a few words on behalf of Mayor Kirkland. He does apologize for not being able to be able to be here in person. I just need to say one thing. First time I tried to help somebody out applying for clemency, that was back in 2009, 2010. It's like night and day right now. I'd like to compliment Secretary Flood for all the good work he's doing. Him and his team it's just amazing. When you call the office up, they answer the phone, return your phone calls in a timely manner. The application process has become so transparent and more easy to navigate. It's achievable now. And what he spoke about people never making it through to the end of the process, I've seen it happen time and time again with numerous people who have tried to help here in the city of Chester. So I'm really happy things are moving in a good direction. I want to thank Brother King for bringing everybody together in this room this evening. It's nice to see everybody's face again. People I haven't seen in quite a while. Some people have retired since I last saw them. Miss Riley Ford over at the Boys and Girls Club, I learned today, has retired. So it's nice to be able to try to re-energize our relationships. And I certainly think we've taken our efforts to help people clear up their criminal records here in the city of Chester to a new level. I work in the Office of Workforce Development, and I used to help out in the Office of Reentry as well. Lisa Dennis used to be the Executive Director of the Community Liaisons. Unfortunately, she hasn't been invited back to her position in City Hall, so therefore, that office theoretically is not operating any longer, the Office of Reentry. The efforts that Mr. King did when he was working over at City Hall. Nicole Cogdale was involved in those efforts as well at that point in time. And they did a lot of hard work, so it pains me to see that in fact, and that young man sitting over there was helping out as well, Nasir Leach. All right, a lot of people that are in this room right now. We were working together before. We lost that momentum because of the current economic situation here in the city of Chester. Mayor Kirkland himself was working the front desk this morning prior to the council meeting with Officer McLean, because we don't have anybody in that building to do that job any longer. And every time I walk in the door and see him doing that, that pains me a little bit. And that is not right. I feel like sitting down in his spot for him. So hopefully we can go back to where we came from and take it to a higher level. I'm really happy that we're doing some positive things here. When I'm able to help somebody clear up their criminal record, and I help people with pardons and expungements myself. I've worked hand in hand with many people in this office. Ms. Erica Bryant has trained me basically, because I'm not a lawyer by trade. And when I have questions, she's kind enough to return my emails and answer my phone calls. So I'm thankful for that professional relationship. So if anybody needs any assistance, the Keystone operation, I believe, is opening up a new division within their wellness center to help people with these matters. We've been helping people over at City Hall since Mayor Kirkland took office, and we will continue to do the best we can with what we have where we're at right now. So I thank you for your time, and it's really good to see everybody again. God bless you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's really good to be here. I do not have the stature of Secretary Flood. Can y'all hear me all the way in the back?
Yeah.
All right. So my name's Erica Bryant. I'm a supervising attorney at Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania. I work with Ms. Megan Reinprecht down at the end, and we both provide free, let me say that again, free legal services to folks who want to clear their records. So we've given, I hope, every single person a handout. There is a copy of the pardon application right in there. You can, of course, get it on the website as well, but it's nice to walk home with something right in your hand. So if any of you are interested in seeing if you can work hand in hand with me, with Megan, with Legal Aid, see if we can look at your record and tell you, maybe we can't get you a pardon tomorrow, but maybe we can expunge some things. Maybe we can seal some things. Maybe we can waive some of that court debt that's been hanging around your neck for the last 15 years. We do have an application form. Anybody who wants to sit and talk to me or Megan one-on-one, we're gonna do that right back there with you guys. We have private rooms. So if anyone wants to talk to us, you've got questions, you want a lawyer to look at your record and tell you your options for free today, we are ready for you. If you have an application form, there are lots passed out, and there are more if you need one. Miss Nicole has them. I think she's just in the hallway. So we're here, and we work with folks on expungement. We work with folks on sealing their records. We work together on the pardons. We work with the district attorney's office to try and waive court debt when you owe money and your case can't be expunged or can't be pardoned because of the money that you owe. We can try and get rid of that for you. And then if your pardon is granted, we can also work together to expunge the record after the fact, if you want. Not only, if you work with Legal Aid, not only is our time completely free, we can also work with the court to get them to not charge that expungement fee, that limited access fee, any of that. So if your income is low enough, if you qualify for Legal Aid, it is completely free process.
That's great.
So what about explain that to me.
So regardless of what your income is, if you fill out the form, we will sit down with you tonight and talk to you one-on-one and give you some guidance.
All right.
Regardless of your income, you are all leaving with like 5 pages of instructions and the free application. Regardless of your income, you've got my contact information, right? So I am here, I'm gonna be as helpful as possible. And let's not forget what Secretary Flood said, right? About how this process is infinitely easier than it was. I've been working with folks with records to get rid of their records for about 7 years at this point, so I have lived through it, right? I can tell you, I would love to stand up here and tell you, it is so hard to apply for a pardon, you have to be a genius to do it, right? That would be a lie. It is just not that hard. If you've got the information, you've got access to the website, this is something every single one of us can do.
And where can they find you tonight? Will you be somewhere in this building somewhere?
Yes, so fill out the application form and we'll be calling you in the order in which you gave us your applications. So we'll probably be creeping in that back corner. So listen for us to call your name or number on your application form. And beyond tonight, our website is on the handout, our phone number is on the handout, so there should be no struggle to reach us going forward.
All right.
And real quick, one thing that if you don't do anything tonight, fines and costs, restitution, legal financial obligations is what they're technically categorized as. That's something that the board looks at and very much takes into consideration. So while you're not prohibited from beginning this process and navigating this process while having outstanding fines and costs, if you get to the point where you have a hearing, you're scheduled for a hearing and you owe outstanding fines and costs, you may be denied. And Erica I called her the guardian angel today because she watched our proceedings one day. There was a young lady who went through the park who had an interview. Our board members, they were concerned because she owed a little bit over $1,000. Erica emailed me during the hearing and said, hey, listen, connect me with that person. I can get their fees waived. Erica was able to manage to do that, get an order in place less than 24 hours, right in time for that, and for me to share that information with the board. So instead of that young lady being denied, which she would have been, she ended up having her pardon granted, and Erica was able to do that just by watching the proceedings. So
That's a place to clap.
yeah. Let me just stop being so reactive. If you don't get with her about nothing else, those fines and costs are key.
Thank you. I see a question from the Public Defender's Office.
Do you have to be applying for a pardon to get help and fines and costs waived?
So for legal aid, if the money that's owed to the court is getting in the way of you being able to get rid of that record, and when I say get rid of, I don't care if you're getting rid of it by a pardon or by an expungement or sealing it. If the debt is meaning you can't break free of that record, we will work with you to try and break free of that record. Now that said, oh thank you, I'll take it.
When people have fines and costs hanging over their head and somehow are not eligible for those services, I do encourage you to reach out to the Office of the Public Defender. There are legal mechanisms for people to have those revisited, and we want to be moving the county forward in that direction.
And what's the PD's phone number?
I will leave my card. Here's what I will tell you, we're getting a new phone system someday soon now, because frankly, when people call us, they have a hard time reaching a person, and it's not okay. There are a lot of changes going on in our office. I will leave my card here. I'm the first assistant in that office, and you can call me direct if you want to deal with fines and costs, and we'll hook you up.
Don't worry about it. I'll put your number on Facebook. And Instagram too.
I know my direct line, but I don't think I'm supposed to do that. I think it's 610-891-4000, but I don't want to like
That's
direct
the
you,
county.
like-
Okay.
4100.
Yes.
4100.
All right. Thank you, guys. So we have
Yeah. So I'm just going to introduce my friend and colleague, Stacy. One of the hardest things I think about the pardon application is that you strongly recommended that you write a personal narrative explaining where you came from, where you are now, why this record shouldn't define you, doesn't describe who you are now. And so Stacy's going to help us all sort of do that work to get ready for that. And then meanwhile, don't mind me, I'm going to be creeping in the back and calling people back one by one.
Thank you, Erica. So hi, I'm Stacy Mandel, and as I was sitting here and we're running out of time, and I'm like thinking, I'm like, I should just not even go up at all. But I'm up here because I believe in a couple of things. I believe in truth, and I believe in power. I teach mindfulness. You're like, huh? What's that? I teach mindfulness over at Toby Farms Middle School. I was in Widener Partnership too for a little bit. This has been I did 2 years. We're about to go into our 3rd year, and I teach mindfulness, which is a particular way of paying attention to what's here and now in a kind and curious way, because I believe that gives us a lot of power. And I believe that if we were all introduced to this way of paying attention, that we would have more power to skillfully make choices, no matter what's going on around us, no matter what's going on inside of us. And so I feel really privileged and honored to have learned that lesson for myself the hard way, and now I am really passionate about offering these skills to people who don't have access to it normally. And if we have time, I'll give you a taste, but we might not. And then the second reason that I'm up here, like Erica mentioned, there is a part of the application called the personal statement. It's section 5, and it says optional. Unless Secretary Floody tells you you don't have to do it, it's not optional. Secretary Floody explained to me that this was put in as optional because a lot of people felt like that was a really intimidating part of the application, whether they didn't have the literacy skills to actually write that part of the application, or they didn't really feel comfortable telling their story. And they don't want to share their story with other people, or feel like they didn't need to share their story. They didn't want that to be a barrier, so they made it optional. But it's been told to me that is actually the most important part of the application, is the personal statement. So I have a bunch of copies of something that I made that could be helpful for you. One is I made a mentor piece, like a sample, a great sample of what a really good personal statement should look like based on what they're asking you to do in the application. And then I also made a little organizer that has 4 questions on it to get you to kind of be able to just brainstorm and collect your thoughts and write your notes down, and that'll help you organize the piece for writing. And then what I want to let you know is that I made a piece of paper up. It's nothing fancy. It looks like this. I put my name and my number on it, and there's a place for your name and your contact info. And if you would like me to help you with that personal statement piece, like a little coaching, it would be my pleasure to help you do that. I'm actually doing that with Jonathan, wherever you are, Jonathan, right? He left the room, but so that would be my pleasure to do that, because that could be a barrier for a lot of people to even do the application, is that personal statement. The other thing I want to mention too is we thought it would be a good idea to make a little list. If you're somebody here who likes accountability and you want a little buddy and you want someone to tag you, this is a little accountability buddy sheet. And just sign your name up on here, and we'll match you up with someone else here in this room who's going through the partner process. And you can say, hey, let's work together. Like, let's set some deadlines, some due dates together. Like in a month, we'll get this section done. You know, in another month, we'll get this section done. We'll talk about what problems we're having together, what we can do together. So I can set you up with somebody if you feel shy about asking somebody. So that's up here. I'll be sitting kind of like where Erica and Megan will be in the back, and I'll have those resources for you on the personal statement. You can also meet with me, and I can kind of help you get started, or talk with you about questions. And the mindfulness piece, how about we take 1 minute to try it? You'll stand in the middle of the room. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you don't have to. If you don't want to close your eyes, you can try looking softly downward, nothing in particular. Just feel yourself kind of sinking in, settling down for a moment. So, reentry, resetting, redemption in that ocean of all those currents. It can be a little distracting. There's a lot going on, things pulling us in different directions, outside of us and inside of us. So I'm just offering you the idea that perhaps, finding your own inherent mindfulness, being able to practice it sometimes, might be of service for you as you're in that ocean. So just settling in for a moment, noticing your body sitting in your seat, and feeling that seat supporting you. Noticing how you're being supported and held and you don't have to do anything. And feeling gravity even, this force that's holding you here. And see if you can just for a moment simply let yourself be as fully here as you can in this moment. And then if you'd like, just bringing your attention gradually to your own breath. And if you're already distracted, that's natural. See if you can return. And just follow it from the very first sip of breath in, all the way to the last whisper out, without working. Just kind of witnessing the natural rhythm of what's already happening. So you can be aware of thoughts, your mood, your to-do list, and at the same time, you could be consciously choosing to put your attention where you want to. And we'll just end it right there. And I'll wrap up by saying that I was on vacation this week and I was swimming in the ocean, and I decided to float in the ocean. So I leaned back, expecting it to be like real easy, and it wasn't. Like even with no waves where I was, there was like water coming up over my belly, and sometimes I felt like I was gonna kind of go under. I had to keep making my body go stiff, put my head back, and it was a little tumultuous. And then I was like, how do I relax? How do I not let myself get carried away by the water here? And I remember to just kind of find my own anchor. And that's what the power of mindfulness can do for us, and it's in all of us. So thank you for your time tonight.
And just to add to that too, we talked about the importance of those narratives. So in the application you'll see there's questions about what your involvement was in the crime that you were convicted of, and then as Stacy mentioned about the optional statement piece. So, you heard me talk about as we get to a point where I'm getting our board members not to interview folks, we're looking merely at the application. So having that narrative is becoming even more important because that's all that our board members have to judge you, right? So oftentimes I get people whose applications are denied, they'll email me and say, hey, one thing that we don't do as a board, we don't issue formal opinions for why someone's denied. And naturally, anyone who's denied will want to know where am I deficient, right? How can I fix or address those deficient areas if I don't know what they are? Oftentimes, the first thing I look at is the application and those narratives and that optional statement. So if I see an application where a guy has one sentence for everything, right? That's probably a good indication that that's where you fell short at there because our board is looking at insight. Now, how much insight does this applicant take in terms of what their responsibility was, what their involvement was, how they've grown, how conscious they are of what their triggers are, especially if you're dealing with substance abuse issues. These are the kind of questions that are asked during the hearing. So to the extent you can already address them in your application, the board becomes more comfortable, right? It's easier to get them to a yes versus them saying, hey, I need to see this person and I need to interview this person in person because I have some outstanding questions. You're able to kind of be preemptive in addressing those questions and you set yourself up for success. So these optional statements, this is where, obviously Stacy helping out, but other organizations being able to, if you want to really help someone with a pardon application, help someone kind of flesh out their thoughts. A lot of people don't, especially depending on how long ago the offense was, you may not, your sense of recall may be compromised, right? You may not be able to remember things. Or some folks just don't like revisiting negative experiences. So that's where it's key. That's where our board member largely looks at in those applications, and that's where a lot of the nonprofits and community-based organizations can be helpful. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question. Good evening, everybody. My name is Brother Juan. I came up here from Philadelphia. I run the Noble Foundation at Broad and Drive. I have a question for the brother that's speaking. What if you're in a situation where, like a lot of us, even some of us sitting in this room, where we were falsely accused of crimes, like myself. I got out of jail because the cops lied. And then it came out later that they lied. But a lot of us was like, yo, sign right here, we could leave. You know what I mean? So some of us still pled guilty just to get out of jail. So my question is, if I'm sitting with the pardon board, and you're saying that we got to take accountability for all these charges, what happens if I never did it, but I just didn't have the king's ransom to be able to pay a lawyer, and you know what I'm saying?
I know
properly fight the charge. Second question I have, what is the likelihood, just being real?
Oh, that's all I am.
With the people sitting in this room, and I don't mean being real coming from you, I'm just saying, with this whole situation. From the people, how many people in this room have a record right now as we speak, or are currently on probation, parole, or whatever? What's the likelihood in us filing for a pardon, our records are wiped clean, we can be licensed to carry, we can go join the police force, we can go be probation officers, join the district. What is the likelihood of after you served your time in prison, after you've been on the front lines, you did it, you ain't killed nobody, you ain't touched no child, you ain't raped nobody. What is the likelihood of getting a real second chance? I've been to thousands of these events, and no disrespect to the people who donated their time today. But what I need to know today is, will the people in this room, will we ever get our lives back? Will we ever go into one of these hearings and say, okay, I did the time, I'm off parole, I'm off probation, I want to go get a real job and take care of my family? Will we ever be wiped clear and given that second chance again?
No, this is a solid question. So the first question is, that's a recurring question that we get. There used to be a time when folks, especially when I first entered the prison system, they used to say, all prisoners say that they didn't do it, right? Everyone's innocent here. But as we see, and it almost seems like we see on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, someone's being exonerated, most notably through the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. So we know that there are folks that are innocent and that are getting a raw deal. So that being said, our board historically, and just the way that our infrastructure is set up, we weren't really set up to deal with cases of innocence. However, and to your point, you see with the application, we ask questions about your involvement. We asked about you taking responsibility and showing compunction. To your point, you can't do that if you didn't commit the crime, right? So we still encourage people to utilize this process. You may have seen last year we had two in SCI Chester, the two lifers, the Horton brothers that had they served, I believe, 27 years. They maintained the whole time that they were innocent and that they were able to get relief. They weren't able to get their record clear, but at least they were able to get their sentences commuted through our board. So, I don't know historically how many folks that have maintained innocence that have been, that received clemency from our board, but we're showing you that these outcomes happen even with lifer cases just as recent as last year. So it does happen. One of the things that we're looking at doing, and some people discourage me from doing this, is working in conjunction with the PA Innocence Project, right? And essentially what I want them to do, and I gave them the mandate, I said, I want to create an addendum to our existing application, but I want this addendum to be geared towards people that are maintaining that they're innocent or that they've been wrongfully convicted, because unfortunately, and this is to your point, our board is looking at people that maintain that they're innocent through the same lens that they look at someone who maintains that, who admits full guilt or culpability, right? And that's unfair. So creating that addendum, at least that our board members can look at an applicant who maintains that they're innocent through that specific lens, and who better to drive what kind of questions are part of that addendum than the folks who were experts in it, the PA Innocence Project.
So what happens if I sit in front of your board and I say, yo, I didn't do it. They let me up, told me to sign right here, and I did. And the cop who locked me up is sitting in federal prison right now.
Well, here's how you can do that, and I wish the district attorney's office was still here, but here's how this happens. Here's how that works. So similar to with Philadelphia, we've seen a lot of cases, especially the 80s and 90s, where there was prosecutorial misconduct. It was rife with that in the prosecutor's office as well as in the police department. So during those instances where it's been proven and that there's been misconduct or malfeasance and someone's been convicted, you're able, us working in conjunction with the district attorney's office, the district attorney weighs in on your application, right? So you can maintain your innocence, and the district attorney can say, hey, listen, I affirm that this is what happened in this applicant's case. They were innocent. This happened, so they're able to substantiate.
The attorney is not willing to do that. Well, we know in Philly he'll do that, but everybody is not under the same privilege.
Well, absent of that, then all you're left with is you being able to communicate that message yourself to the board. But
so basically, you taking a chance.
Right. But the one thing that's different about at least me being in this role is I don't have a problem reaching out and convening those conference calls. So if I say, my man, go contact the district attorney and figure it out, I'm not going to tell you to do that. I'm going to convene the phone call. We'll get all of us in the office together, all of us on the line together, and be able to reconcile where those discrepancies were, where that misconduct was, and that'll be part of the record. And I'm certainly vocal as secretary. Once I have that information and we're in executive session, I'm letting our board members know, hey, and I got you, ma'am, there's a peculiar issue with this. District attorney affirms this guy's account. So during those instances, I'm literally going to work hand in hand with you when it comes to that. But to your point, it's still always a crapshoot, right? Because you have 5 board members, 5 different areas of expertise, 5 different viewpoints. They're looking at certain things. Some people may place more weight into an issue than another board member will, but I'm not going to leave you alone out there to do it yourself.
That sort of goes into the issue of how we sort of got here as a country, but different people having different opinions when it should be all one sound, one mind. The rule should be the rule, the law should be the law. And I'm only saying that because when you're asking people affected by the system to come in these rooms and be a part of these events, we have to be able to get up and leave out knowing without a blind shadow of a doubt that I can possibly get off parole and can have my record cleared today.
No, I got you. And this is this answers your second question too. So you talked about the probability, right? So we're very stats driven. If you go to our website, you can literally see how many applications were filed, how many hearings were scheduled, how many the governor have signed, how many were denied. And we have a pretty high success rate. I can say for myself, prior to me getting a pardon, I never ran into anyone that received a pardon. Most people, probably prior to these kind of events, didn't know anyone either. Our success rate is, when I say success, I mean applications that are recommended to the governor are over 70%. And in my particular...
Out of how many people?
Out of If we look at last, look, if I'm saying 2,400, if I'm saying last year 2,400 people applied. If I'm saying 70% of those that go of that 24, 70% of them are receiving favorable decisions.
So the 70%, meaning meaning their records are clear, they can go be licensed to carry,
Right.
they can go take the police test, they can be a CO or do any of that stuff.
Right.
70% of people last year out of 2,400 received the part.
Right, and that varies by year too, because one year we may have more folks that have robberies or murders that apply versus one year we may have more folks that have property crimes or drug offenses. So, and then even for myself, I was convicted of possession with intent to deliver cocaine, two felonies, and possession of an unlicensed firearm. And I told you the last time I was released in 2010, so I've been home for about 11 years and was able to obtain that relief. So certainly,
most of the people that's in these rooms that come to these events, they got drama.
well, listen, but
So we're not the
here's
guys
your point.
that's like trying to get stealing candy bars out of Rite Aid or
Yeah, well, I'm saying 2 felony convictions for possession with intent to deliver cocaine and a firearm. And, let me stop. Let me stop.
Oh my God.
And the firearm and having an extensive juvenile history. So I'm a pretty good case study for at least when you to the subset of folks that you talked about, nonviolent, non-sexual. Pretty good outcomes. You heard me say earlier, 80% of the people that I encounter that are interested in applying are better applicants than I. A lot of times we screen ourselves out because we don't hear about these success stories. Not everyone, when they get a pardon, wants to trumpet that shit, right? Some people want to be able to leave the past as the past. So a lot of times you don't hear that. But I'm telling you statistically, more than half of the folks that apply for this process, especially that only increases when it's non-sexual, violent offenses, they obtain a favorable outcome from this board. And we're going to continue to track that. That's part of me. One of the things we're doing is tracking that specifically so I can impress upon our board, hey, listen, 80% of the cases that you guys are dealing with are low-level folks that you're saying yes to anyway.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Here.
Most people with drama that's coming up there, it's like they don't even, but the people that's coming up, drug offenses, okay, you might have had a gun case, but we're talking about the drama, the shootings,
First degree, second degree, third degree.
Thank you.
Kick it out to 'em.
Well, listen, we got folks that even, I believe,
I just want, excuse me for 1 second, because.
Yeah, we don't want you to monopolize.
Yeah, because everybody else, it's other people that got questions that want to ask the secretary. Out of respect for all of the people in this room, we got cut that, right?
All right, and listen, I'm gonna end on one note, just so to satisfy this.
Let him end on one note.
So we had someone earlier this year who was convicted of 3rd-degree murder, who pled guilty to 3rd-degree murder, who has their record pardoned, clear, their life's restarted. So it does vary on a case-by-case basis. So you generally saying that you have drama. There are some folks that receive favorable outcomes that have drama, but obviously no two cases are alike. That said, part of my job and part of me being as accessible and hands-on as I am, is I'm going to sit down for anyone here that has drama. I'm going to sit down with you one-on-one and tell you exactly what the probability is. Here's what your deficiencies are. Here's some things you may want to prepare for. Here's some questions that are going to be posed to you. So I'm going to set you up for success. But at the end of the day, I can't guarantee outcomes. All I can do is equip you with the knowledge to put your best foot forward. And that's what we've been doing the last 2.5 years.
And
So with that being said,
how important
but-
is the story, though?
Right,
How important is the
Right,
story?
and this is to the point, and this is with the beginning of my commentary, when we talk about people with drama. Part of what the board wants to see is that insight, right? Because if you talk about someone that has, let's say I got juvenile history, I got violent offenses, I had 2 robberies over the span of 10 years, I have a pattern of violent behavior, right? And so, especially when it comes to our corrections expert. He's the clinical one, right? So he's looking at patterns of behavior. If you've been doing the same thing or the same types of crime over the years, I'm gonna need you to explain how you've been able to make that pivot from that. So being able to flesh that out and articulate that and show that insight, that's what leads to favorable outcomes for people that have drama. Obviously, you don't have to say much of anything when you've got low-level offenses, especially if they're dating. But if you have offenses where you have instances where someone has drama, that's where it's key for you to be able to show that insight, articulate how you've made that change, and how you've been able to stay on the straight and narrow. And that's the services that Stacy's providing.
Right. So I just want to just pause for a second. I want to make this because we ain't in here debating. I want everybody to know that, right? I want y'all to know that we're not in here debating. People who have questions, I want everybody to have an opportunity to ask the secretary. He didn't have to drive down here from Harrisburg. He really didn't. He did it on the strength of us, right?
Yeah, that plane ticket didn't come.
That's
so
right.
Still waiting on that.
And for the record, he didn't ask me to give him a dime, ever. He's doing this on the strength that he loved his work. So we want to keep that kind of energy in this room.
Absolutely.
With everything that we do in here. He is not against us in no way. He's not working with the system to try to do all of these things. This is for everybody. And anybody that don't know what's really going on. He's probably the oldest person, one of the oldest person here with a pardon. But I want to tell y'all something else that y'all probably don't know. Kevin Morgan, stand up. This is the youngest person probably in PA that I know that got a pardon. And tell him how you did the pardon.
I did it myself.
Okay? So this is good. I just want to let y'all know, this is not a gimmick. It's happening, for real. This is not a gimmick. We really putting in work in so people can be free, for real. So I just want to say, so we want to go in a question in order. We want to respect each other's time. We want to respect the secretary time. And please, y'all, limit y'all questions to just a minimum amount so everybody can have a chance to speak. This young lady has asked me, she wanted to make a statement, and I have to let her make a statement because she works with Brandon.
Absolutely.
And please.
So first of all, let me say this. Brandon makes the difference. I want y'all to take a moment. He is the first black man to serve in this position. He is a felon. He has completely reformed the office. We have to support him and his effort. He has quadrupled the availability of all of you to come. I want to ask this question. How did Brandon get appointed? Who appointed Brandon? No, I want to ask. Answer me. Who appointed Brandon?
Lieutenant Governor.
Okay, so who voted for the lieutenant governor in the last primary?
We did.
Did you? Right. So what we have to do, because Brandon's here under the Wolf administration, so we all have to be mindful of your story and how that resonates into the next vote. Because when you're benefiting for how he has reformed this office and you're going to pay it forward to somebody else, think about who's running for lieutenant governor next time. That's how you get the power. That's how you change the story. And that's how you get your individual drama stories validated. You have to be civically engaged moving forward. You've got to force the elected officials to listen to you. We need to get Brandon's office more funded. Okay? He needs more people and he needs more money. I'm going all outside of Philly and Pittsburgh because there's black and brown men in Johnstown, in Uniontown, in Williamsport, in Hazleton, in Hanover.
And ladies.
And what?
Black ladies, black and brown ladies.
Well, I said black and brown
said
people.
men.
Oh, well, black and brown people. And I've been out there. But I need y'all to understand.
Excuse me, honey. Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Hey, yo, look, Brother Raheem, in all respect to you, okay?
All right.
That was my friend Richard, all right? How many letters I get from you this year, Mr. Floyd? I got about 2, right? And what did you say to me?
Oh, who are you for starters? Let's go there.
Secretary Bill. You said, Mr. Deal, when they deny it, brother, I'll give you the reason why they deny it so y'all can go back to the table and find out how we can correct it. You sent me a letter back and said, man, I can't give you shit. But they didn't say shit. You said, I can't give you that. We can't give you the reason why we deny it. If you're going to deny it, brother, how we going to help him, man?
Let me stop you. So,
You wrote me the letter.
to be clear here.
Did you give me a letter?
I'm about to tell you. So
Tell him why. You can't answer.
I'm trying to answer it. So listen, the letter okay, sir. So the letter he's talking about, right? Obviously, I don't write all of my letters, right? I have a staff. So when he was denied, presumably, I still don't know who he is.
$7,000 a head. That's why he got me.
Okay, listen. So he was denied, presumably. So when we deny someone, we have a standardized denial letter, right? So I don't craft that personally. And you heard me say not even 15 minutes ago, we don't issue formal opinions why someone's denied. Right. But if he spoke to me on the phone, he would know that I would have told him personally. So as a board, I can't tell you why you're denied, but personally, I can tell you what, in my professional opinion, where you were deficient. So that clearly didn't happen. The letter he's talking about is the standardized letter that we provide folks that are denied. So instead of him being, belligerent about it, we can have a conversation, dig deep, and find and I can offer my personal opinion.
Back to civic engagement.
Thank you. So the point is, everybody,
I got you and then you, ma'am.
I'm visiting, I'm gonna sit down. But I wanted to take this moment because we've been working hand in hand. I came to learn about Chester, to learn about all of you, so we can help the bigger picture. We need to now take our stories, take our efforts to force the General Assembly to do this, because I have learned. I don't have a personal story. I don't have a boo that used to be in jail. I don't have it. I sat in a barbershop in Johnstown and I heard all these young men tell me how they were in jail before they went to high school. I have a son. I'm a black mother. So I'm just saying we got to take this moment to support Brandon. The fact that he's reformed it. I'm going to put names out there. When Mike Stack was there, Lieutenant Governor, the numbers of applications in and sought are nil compared to what he has reformed. So let's take that. Let's take your stories. I'm here. I'm working with Carol. I'm working with Brandon. I'll work with anybody. We all have to bring this together. And like she said, be civically engaged, be diligent and focused. You got elected officials, they work for you. Stop letting the negative stigmatism about Chester be your last story. Pull up, Chester. That's all I'm saying.
Here's how we're going to do order. I'm going to get my man, his hand was up. I'm going to get you, ma'am, and then in the middle. Yes, sir.
Oh, my damn nerves. Come on out here.
Answer to give you some sort of hope. I got out in 2010 as well, and I dreamed of a party, always wanted a party. There's things I wanted to do, and it wasn't until I read this story that was given to me by my uncle side. He gave me this story. He said, "Nephew, I'm telling you, you can do it." I read this story, and I got with him to start my process. The last time you were here was stop me in my process. Is the last time you were here, you said something that resonated with me. You said that when it came to recommendation letters, I was asking how important were they? And you said, unfortunately, there are people on the board who care more about who wrote the letter as opposed to the content. And so that had us, how many of us have access to people who hold content? For instance, the two people that was dear to me, my late brother, Darren Austin, who's the former chief of police, and my late brother, Kevin Payton, who just passed away. He's a police officer. I don't have those two men in my life to write a letter for me anymore. So I was like, who holds that? Who holds who holds the weight that the board would see deemed as, favorable? So I was thinking maybe you can, because we're here in Chester. It's the third time you've been here. So Chester holds some weight when it comes to parties, because we've been hit with mass incarceration. We need a break in this city. So I was thinking, why not come up with some type of subcommittee that might consist of a Jonathan King, a Mary Linder, district attorney, a 5-board where it goes, here I am, James Miller, I fill out an application, I submit it to the subcommittee, who knows me intimately, who's seen me at my worst, who's seen me at my best, and who can say, you know what, Pennsylvania, Mr. Miller has passed the test. Well, now you can, instead of putting the pressure on somebody to, because can I go to the mayor to get a letter? Can I go to Representative Kirkland to get a letter? Can I go to the chief of police to get a letter?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm gonna answer that yes. Now, and I get
so some type of subcommittee that can also help streamline. Whereas though I know when I fill out my application, I give it to this committee. I sit down with them, they meet with them, and they give me their okay. And now that that's just
no, I got you. So to address the question here, and this is something that I didn't say earlier, but I'll repeat it. So the last time I was here. So letters of support go a long way, right? Usually when we talk about these kind of processes where people solicit letters of support, the letters really don't mean a lot. But in this process, and what I said exactly to that brother was that there are some members on our board, admittedly, I'm looking to the camera, some members on our board that care more about who the letter is coming from versus the content of the letter, right? So I usually tell people, you probably want to save the letters from family members and friends, because most family members and friends are going to say, Brandon's the best thing since sliced bread, even if I'm a piece of shit, right? So they're looking for people that can give just to keep it funky. They're looking for objective opinions, right? People who are willing to put their names and reputation on the line. To your second point, in terms of how to go about doing it. So now I'll talk about myself as a pardon applicant, a former pardon applicant. So I submitted 12 letters of support with my application. And I was very intentional about who I solicited these letters from. So 7 of those 12 letters were from white conservative men that worked in judiciary, law enforcement, or in government, because I felt that if I get 7 people that worked in that sphere to back me, presumably objective parties, that the board, that would carry a lot of weight with the board. I did end up getting a 5-0 during both of my hearings, so I think that did resonate with the board. To your point about how to go about doing that, and then obviously I can't speak for both the senator and representative, but part of this process and part of navigating this process is being confident about this process, right? So when people say, when should I put in? I should tell people, don't put in unless you're confident that you're deserving, right? So you need to channel that same confidence and reaching out to a Representative Kirkland, reaching out to a Senator Kane. At the end of the day, I tell people all they can do is tell you no, right? And those 7 of 12, those 7 white conservative men that I ultimately solicited letters from, initially I wasn't going to do it because I worked with them. So, and they didn't know about my background. So for me, I didn't want to potentially impair those relationships if I said, hey, listen, me alerting them to that. But ultimately, I decided I was going to ask for it because I felt like, to your point, you dreamed of getting a pardon. It was for all the marbles at this point. So why would I not exhaust my network of people? And at the end of the day, what I said to myself was, all they can do is say no. Luckily for me, none of them said no. However, there were some folks that wanted to sit down and wanted more detail. There were some people who just were a yes by default, but there were some people that wanted to sit down and learn more. So that, and you heard me say even with the district attorney, reaching out, when I tell people to reach out to the district attorney, most people, that's an intimidating process, right? Most people, who especially been through the system, they don't want nothing to do with the district attorney if they don't have to. But here's the thing here, and this is what, being strategic about this is, most people aren't reaching out to the district attorney. So I know if I was a district attorney, I would actually find it more endearing for someone to reach out, want to sit down with me and say, hey, listen, here's what I'm asking for, here's why I'm deserving of that. Because a lot of people aren't doing it. And that's what sets you apart, by doing things that other people aren't doing. And then lastly, as I said to the brother who exited earlier, or the brother there, I will help facilitate the conversation, right? So if you got a ton of elected officials and dignitaries in this room that were in this room earlier. If you're not comfortable broaching that conversation, I will assist you with that. But at the end of the day, that decision maker is going to want to hear from you. So there's only so much I'm going to do for you, because you need to do what you need to do for you. So that said, I will actually facilitate that. But I think there's some merit to the subcommittee idea. You have my contact information. We can talk a little bit more offline about what that looks like in practice.
Is there a minimum of letters you recommend as like 12? Is that target or 3?
Yeah, that's a good question too, because we have some people that submit 100 letters, right? And that's why I said you get 100 letters from family members, and 2 letters from your senator carry as much weight as the 100 letters. So there's really no appropriate amount or minimum amount. I think at the end of the day, the board, whatever you think gives you an advantage, right? And if you're getting letters from people that have reputable characters or reputations, solid reputations, those are the ones that will really be able to get you across the goal line. So there is no minimum amount, but I think the main litmus test for what kind of letters you should be getting, number one, make sure they're objective parties, and make sure that they would be willing to affirm what they're saying about you in the letter in the event the board wanted to have more of a conversation with them. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to introduce myself to you. My name is Erica Parham. I am the Assistant District Attorney, and I do work in Delaware County. Some of you know me. But I just wanted to respond to the young man who's sitting over there. He's gone now. But I just wanted to encourage people. when someone works for you as a public official, they have a obligation to meet with you. I can tell you that my boss was here and the first assistant was here. They work for you, so call them. I can tell you how many times I've seen Tanner walking through the halls, talking to people. People call, they want to meet, he meets with you. And I just hope you will all not feel like, oh, well, you know, they're not in Philly. They're not like Philly. And we're not. We're not like Philly. But we do have a commitment to change. We have a commitment to fairness. You heard that from Tanner. And I can just tell you, I mean, I've worked in Jack Stolzheimer is my 4th DA. I started working at the DA's office in 2005. And before that, I worked at the PD's office. And before that, I worked at legal aid here in Chester. So I can tell you, my 4th DA, that you can call our office. We pick up the phone and we meet with people. And don't feel intimidated. And don't feel like, oh, I can't have access. Because I've seen people in this room, Darren, Corey Long, Jonathan himself. Y'all come through our office on a regular. Y'all want something, y'all know how to pick up the phone. So that should go for everybody. Pick up the phone and ask for me. That's all.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for your service too.
I can back her up because I called Jay a week ago and he met with me within 2 days and willing to help me. And I'm from Philly, and that bureaucratic nonsense that's going down in Philly. It took me 3 years to get a letter. And I talked to the woman before she even took position. It's to the point now where they're ready to fight the folks down here because they're not keeping their promises.
Right, and one of the things to remember too is that you have to bear in mind that the vast majority of applications that we receive are from Philadelphia County. So Philadelphia County is well versed in how the executive clemency process works. But there are some counties, there are literally some counties that never dealt with a pardon application. Carbon County, for instance, you know, you have some folks that served as DAs for 30 years, they retired, it's new blood in, they have no clue about what executive clemency is. So a lot of people are just now learning how this works, in particular a lot of the decision makers in DAs. So when you say, hey, this county isn't as progressive as Philadelphia, then teach them how to be. Educate them about what they're doing in Philadelphia, how they can replicate that in your county. Same thing, I'm from a very conservative county, Dauphin County. So, you know, I've over the last 10 years, I made it a point to build a relationship with my district attorney, Fran Charter. So we have that open line of communication. He understands what kind of applicants are coming before him. We have those conference calls easily. As the assistant DA said in the back, you know, you need to be proactive. You need to, you know, they work for you. They're paid with taxpayer money. So they can't, you know, to the point that was made, they can't refuse to meet with you. They may not be able, they may not provide the outcome that you're seeking, but let's not screen ourselves out. And this is part of the issue, just beyond pardons, when it comes to reentrance. The most difficult part of being able to transition back into society is we oftentimes screen ourselves out of opportunities. You know, as opposed to feeling like you go into that room or making that phone call like you deserve to be there. You deserve to be there, you deserve to be heard. God, your position deserves to be heard. So we need to have that mindset. That kind of mindset yields favorable outcomes. Sir, in the middle, and then I got you.
Yeah, my name is Conrad Cooley, and I'm a veteran.
Thank you for your service.
Years in prison. And my concern is, with the pardon board, I have tried to put together some myself for other cities that been down 50 to 60 years in prison, right? How do we reach them people? You know, they don't have nobody on the street. They've been locked up most of their life. So when it comes time to the pardon thing, you know, you got the jailhouse lawyers, we all trying to scramble out how to do things, but they got to make phone calls and they can't reach out. You know what I mean? The only way they can get out is people like me who come out and try to advocate for them. You know,
No, that's a great point. So, and this is what I would say to the brother if he was still in the room. Now, many people know, and you can ask a lot of prisoners have my work cell number. So I'm on quite a few phone lists. Now, I don't know when they're calling, so sometimes I'm able to answer, sometimes I'm not. And when I've toured the prisons, I've told them it's hit or miss. Try me and I'll answer. So we try to open that line of communication. One of the things that the Lieutenant Governor has done, and this may address your issue, is he's hired 2 formally commuted lifers who serve as commutation specialists for us, and they work in the Philadelphia area. Naomi Blunt, who served, I believe, 37 years for second-degree murder. She didn't even commit the crime. She was just there. And George Trudell, who served 31 years, he also was convicted of second-degree murder. Wasn't the principal in his case. He was just he was along for the ride. So we have those 2 folks that are on the payroll whose job specifically is to address commutation-related offenses. So obviously, as the prisons are starting to open back up post-corona, we're going into every prison. Obviously, I have a SEI Chester holds a near and dear place in my heart, and as the brother said, it's my 3rd time here. I think I've been to Chester more than I've been anywhere else in the state. So holds a near and dear place in my heart, and that access is there. Again, literally have my cell number. That's why I was saying with, you talked about my predecessors, a lot of people don't, and I'm used, obviously I'm used to conflict, right? And I'm not easily intimidated, or whereas some of my predecessors, like even that blow up, right? Some folks don't want to make themselves accessible because not everyone is lauding me or saying, hey, good job, Secretary. You got some people that, hey, listen, man, things didn't go the way I wanted, and I feel like you need to change it. And I'm willing to listen to that, and I'm willing to confront that in a civil manner directly. So that's one of the, if nothing else, from a cultural standpoint, you have someone that literally, I don't have the luxury of having an assistant. I could have someone do that, but I'd rather have them processing applications as opposed to scheduling my trips and stuff, or preparing speeches. I answer my phone calls directly. I answer my emails directly. So, if you can communicate to that brother, he has a direct line to me. I'll leave a card to him. But obviously, every correspondence you receive from the Board of Pardons isn't necessarily comes from my actual pen. We have, obviously due to volume, we have boilerplate language or template letters that are already crafted and that are generated automatically. But that access piece is there. So, sir, we do have those 2 commutation specialists, George Trudell and Naomi Blunt. Any other questions, feedback, criticisms? I mean, I'm here for it all.
I have a question. You probably mentioned it, but I didn't hear you. How long did it take for your pardon? Like once you put in an application, how long did it take?
So for me, it took about 3 years, and this was in 2019. It took about 3 years, and I said we're expediting for certain offenses, especially those that are older offenses. We're working with Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, and this is where, I said it somewhat facetious that I'm inviting criticism, but we do invite that, right? And Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, it's a guy named Toby Oxone. I consider him an ally, but he's also a person who won't hesitate to say, hey, you guys aren't doing enough, or here's what another state is doing. Why can't you guys do this? What's standing in the way? And as was said earlier, I'm appointed to this position. Admittedly, I'm not trying to stay in this position forever. It's a very taxing position, but there's some things I want to change while I'm in this role. But that being said, even when I leave, I want to be able to, whoever the next person is to succeed me, to have a lot of these changes in place, and there's always going to be room for improvement. So, and we can't improve unless we know we're deficient. So the other part of this too, me being appointed and not trying to be here forever, is it really don't take a subcommittee. It really takes, we used to have an advisory council, 30 people, have them come to Harrisburg quarterly, buy lunches, and really nothing came from that. So when I first came in, I said, hey, listen, we're not going to do the advisory council because you have direct access to me now, right? So don't take for us to have a big meeting in Harrisburg and feed you. Send me if you email me an idea that makes sense, that's all it takes. And I take it to the board. And either they say yes or no. So, that's part of simplifying it because you have that access. There's not many secretaries or agency heads where you would be able to certainly, John can certainly tell you, we'd be able to call or text them or, and certainly them get back to you directly. So that's the one benefit that you have. That's kind of the double-edged sword with this office, it being as small as it is, that we're much more interpersonal with applicants. So, but, your point's well taken.
Well, there's a lot of people in the room that have left. I don't think there's probably might be less than 10 people in this room that don't know who I am. For those that don't know who I am, my name is Cypherdine Simpson. From 1976 to 2006, I was in jail on parole, on probation. I was at 2.5 years. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go through the program that the guy had graded for to get my bachelor's degree from Villanova, so I want to get my master's degree from Springfield.
Hey, my man said he, I don't know if it'll work for you.
No, I don't need to.
He said he couldn't hear you in the middle, excuse me.
Okay, well, basically, what I want everybody to know, there's probably nobody in this room, unless somebody can tell me this, experienced more with pardon applications, or done more pardon applications than me. I've probably done over 30 or 40 pardon applications, clemency positions. I have probably 15 before the board right now. I got 7 that I'm trying to get in. But for the people that are here, still, what I want to stress to you is what is important is change. Have you changed? What are you doing now? That's the important thing. That's what the board wants to hear. And you also have to have the courage to put the application in. You know what I mean? So that's what it's about. All this other stuff, all this other talk, it's not, you know, a lot of it's red. Focus on what are you doing now? How have you changed? Did you participate with the prescriptive program plan that the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections laid before you? It's very simple. And if you put that information before anybody, I don't care who they are, if it's valid and it sounds good, they can't turn you down. So focus on that. What are you doing now? That's all I want to say, you know what I mean?
One thing I want to emphasize about this too is, and this is where we're changed, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? So I remember when I went through this process as an applicant, I was on parole for 5 years, no incidents whatsoever, none, without a blemish. And I asked my parole officer at the time, I said, hey, can you do a letter of support for my pardon application? And he told me, I'm not allowed to do so. So, I mean, I took that, went with it. So obviously, when I first got appointed to the position, one of the first agencies I contacted was probation and parole, because in my opinion, and you just hit, you touched on it, who better to write a letter than the very agency or entity that supervised me for 5, 10, 15 years, right? So I asked the board chair for probation and parole, I said, what's your policy on allowing folks to, your officers, your supervisors, directors to do letters of support? He said, typically, we don't do that, but we're not against doing it, right? So that simple conversation, now it's permissible now, right? Folks can, and we actually encourage, especially when people are looking to commute, to either get rid of their parole or a pardon. You're now able to contact probation and parole, and this goes to your point about being able, who can you reach out to, how can you reach out to certain folks that will have a lot of impact in recommending you. Probation and parole is one such entity, and again, same deal with that too. I got you, brother. Will help facilitate those conversations, and more importantly, be able to dispel a lot of the misconceptions about the process. Because sometimes, and I'm just going to keep it real, there are some people don't want to do a letter for you, right? And the easy thing is to say, hey, my hands are tied. They won't allow us to do it, right? Because they don't want to do it. So I'm trying to absolve folks of using that same trite excuse that I can't do it when you should be the principal person providing that recommendation. So that's also another source of letters of support is probation and parole. Yes, sir.
Yes. My name is Tyrone Lacey, Agent Tyrone Lacey from the Board of Probation and Parole, and that's why I'm answering this question. Yes, there's nothing in policy that they say you can't write a letter of recommendation, but I think what you're speaking to is the culture of probation and parole, and just being friendly. The culture in probation and parole is, as an agent, like, why would you do that? Or don't do that. So it's not in policy, but a lot of places, not as bad on the east side of the state as the west. The culture is what tells an agent, I shouldn't write this. So I think that's loosening up, but it is there. Additionally, listen, I'll tell you, ask your agent, if you're doing everything you're supposed to do, but listen, an agent either testifying for you or writing a letter for you, it is serious. Because like the gentleman said, they are putting their reputation on the line. They're saying, hey, this person is A, B, and C. So don't BS. If you're gonna come, be who you say you are. Because if you are who you say you are, your agent knows you are who you say you are. Don't just say, well, look, I'm just gonna ask my agent, and you kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, doing what you're supposed to do. If you are that, don't hesitate. Ask him or her. Ask him to do the letter. And like I said, he's 100% right. There is no policy saying they can't. But a lot of agents are hesitant because of the culture of probation and parole. But like I said, it's loosening up now. You have District Director Michelle Rivera and Mr. Willis. They're great people, and they're all about reentry. So that is loosening up now. So ask. But like I said, when it comes, always come correct.
Right, and this is where and thank you for that too. Appreciate your work. And that's where it's about being confident, right? If you don't believe in you or believe in the merits of your candidacy, why do you think you're requesting a letter from would do that? And then also to your point too, this is part of what we impressed upon probation and parole is what better incentive? If you want a more compliant caseload, when I came home from jail, I didn't know nothing about pardons or executive clemency. If I didn't work for the House of Representatives and didn't come across it just in, probably during my internship, just looking at tinkering with the Constitution, I didn't even know it was a thing. And that's usually not even a conversation that's had with probation and parole when you get out, right? They tell you what your stipulations are, but the conversation about executive clemency doesn't come up. So, part of the conversation that was had with probation and parole is if you educate folks on your caseload about this, you can have this will at least provide for a more compliant caseload because that incentive's there, right? That carrot is there. And I know for me, when I found out about executive clemency, I tried to make sure I didn't get as much as a parking ticket. I was being a choir boy because I wanted to have that unblemished record when I went before the board. And that was the added incentive for me. And as a result of that, I was a much better probationer than I would have been had I not known of that, probably. Yes, sir.
If some people here still doubt whether it works, I can say it worked for me. I think after I came home, I don't think I was on parole for a year, and I had about 5 or 7 years to walk off. I was on parole in a year. I went out to Cheney, made all A's, sang in the choir, and my parole man said, hey, I need a winning case. You're a winning case. I see no reason to keep you on, and I was off. So it does work.
Right, and you raised one important point, so congratulations. And I'm gonna come to you, I just wanted to emphasize one thing. So I talked about executive clemency consisting of pardons and commutations, but I spoke more so in the context of pardons and then people in prison who want their sentences commuted. But there's also the ability, if you're on parole for a long period of time, that you can get rid of what they call the tail, the maximum sentence. So if you want to be able to get off of parole early, that's also a service that's provided by way of that commutation. Yes, sir.
So I wanted to, and I wasn't going to speak. My name is Darren Laws. First thing, Cypher Dean, like you said, you got to trust the process. I've been working in law enforcement for about 28 years. I worked for Erica in the DA's office. A lot of people didn't know this. I was also 13 years with the FBI under Obama's with the Citizens Academy. So when we talk about trust the process, we got our brother right here, Ty Trader, who had a life sentence, did 17 years. Yeah. So sending letters, communicating, keeping him on point, making sure he trusts the process, what we're doing out here, and what he needs to do in there. This letter right here, I'm a spokesperson for the Department of Corrections where I go inside the prisons and I speak to the lifers. And I encourage them to keep doing what they're doing. Have that hope. But I'm not doing that by myself. I have resources like Brother, Jonathan King, my man Wells right here. So they want to see what type of collaboration do you have and what you're doing. I'm in the process of now working with Larry Stevenson, 47 years. He has a life sentence. So what we're doing is being consistent. show them what we do, going in front of the judges. Tyrone Trader been home probably about a month. We have a nonprofit. We have our own landscaping company. We give back to the community, feeding Chester communities and other communities every Wednesday. So when they see things like that, not just us, but all of us collectively doing things, then they'll know, you know what, it's working. It's working. We had 3 guys that just came home probably about 3 weeks ago. I'm also the project development manager for Today's Labor. Guys coming home making $15, $20 an hour at a labor company. So with Tafiq, Michelle, Tyrone Trader, and you guys keep doing what you're doing, it works. I've been doing it. I've been doing it for years. I know it works. A guy from Chester did not imagine that I would be doing this work that I'm doing. And to the grace of God, I'm not even supposed to be here. 2019, I basically died. I had cancer. So I'm here for a reason. So when this brother get up here and talk, and we have some people talk about, you know, yo, you gotta trust the process. It worked. Got a great relationship with Judge Kelly. Got a great relationship with a lot of the judges. So if we stay consistent and we do what we need to do, it's gonna work. I've been doing this long enough. So, like I said, I wasn't gonna say nothing, but I felt like I needed to share this. Not only that we work in Chester, we work in Philadelphia and in Southwest Philly, skills and drills with the killing everything that's going up there, trying to bring the brothers together. And we're doing a lot of things in Chester that we don't want to share. When we talk about the shooters, when we talk about talking to guys, yo, you can get a job, man, put them guns down. Some of these guys are listening. So I just wanted to share that because I know we hear a lot that's going on with Brandon. It's just not him. If we it's a judge in Philadelphia. Her name is Judge Doomis. She always say, gentlemen and ladies, put your thinking caps on. And I'm always on the run. I'm always trying to make things happen. We have a partnership with University of Penn with jobs. We have a partnership with Amazon. So we can go on and on when we talk about jobs. There's jobs out there. It's whether you want to go get it and be the go-getter. That's right. We got a brother right here in EU. EU do a lot of things. So we have resources in this room. But one of the things I want to know, when we going to all come together and put our differences aside and say, you know what? We all here to help each other. Me and Raheem worked together collectively for years. So it worked. It worked. Dane Majid, I worked with him. It's a lot of guys that came home that we may not even know that's doing great things. That's doing great things. We got my man Nasir Leach. So I just wanted to share that. And the last 2 years, I stopped working in law enforcement and I was retired. The school district asked me, they said, Mr. Laws, can you work with our students on citizenship and character building? Take me up Toby Farms. I won't go with the roughest kids. You got to talk to them. You got to tell them you love them. You got to show them that you care. And sometimes you got to trip.